Kate, and tonight we're going to do something a little unusual. I've had a lot of people ask me if I would show them how I can ground beef. Now the USDA does not approve of home canned meat, but I have been doing this for years, and my family has eaten it for years, and it's never made anyone sick. And I know a lot of other people that have done it too. You've asked me to show you how I do it, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to tell you this is the way you should do it. I'm going to tell you this is the way I do it. You make your own research and make your own decisions. I have started with almost a full 15 pounds of ground beef. I've got most of it already in the bottles and in the canner. I didn't think you wanted to watch me put 15 pounds of ground beef into jars in the canner. So I saved the final two. That'll give you a chance, for those of you who've never done any canning, to see how we do it. Here's my ground beef, and I have pint jars. And the reason I do pint jars instead of quart jars is because there's only two of us here eating. And if you have a quart jar, you open it up, you make a recipe, you use about half a jar, put the other one in the refrigerator, and I promptly forget it's there and go on to something else, and it ends up going bad. So I'm using pint jars this time. I'm also using the wide mouth instead of the standard mouth because it's easier to get meat in and out. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to pack this as full as we can up to the first ring on the neck of the jar. That will give us 1 inch of headspace when we can, and I'm going to have to try and get as much of the air out of here as possible. That takes a little elbow grease. And yes, some people like to put plastic gloves on their hands, but I don't care if I get a little meat on my hand. That does wash off. So what I do is I just start with a little meat and drop it down in there, and I press down with my fingers to get it as flat in there as I can and to get out as much of the air as I can. And I just keep doing that over and over again. I go around the outside first to try and mash the two layers together, and then I use my knuckles and the flat of my fingers to get the center. Now, each of these pint jars takes just about a pound of hamburger meat. Most recipes call for things in either 1 or 2 pound increments. So if you have a 1 pound increment, you use 1 jar. If you have a 2 pound increment, you use 2 jars. It's that easy. Now, it takes a little bit of muscle because the meat is soft and it likes to get air in it. And it's kind of hard to mush it down well enough to get it all out. But if you keep working on it, eventually you will get most of that meat out. I do suggest that you press down pretty hard, and it'll kind of rotate the meat in the jar. But that's okay because that gets more of the air bubbles out. I don't know if you can see in the camera my fingers inside the jar, but each time I press down like that, I am pressing down and in with my fingers like this, so that I can press any air that happens to be in there out. And then I go to the center and I press down flat. And we just keep working until we have it up to that 1 inch headspace. Just like that. Now that has a few air bubbles that I couldn't get to, but most of it is out. I'm going to do the other one, and then we'll go on to the next step. Our jars are filled. I'm going to step away and rinse my hands. I'll be right back. The next step to prepare for canning is we have to clean the rim and the threads of the jar. I use a little bit of plain white vinegar and a clean paper towel. Dip it in, and I run it all the way around the jar, being sure to get anything that might be left on those rims off. And as you can see, there was a little something there. So I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to change the spot on the paper towel, so I'm sure I get everything off those threads and off that rim. And that one's done. Now let's go to the other one. And again, there was some on the outside of the rim, just a little bit, but there was enough that we want to do it a second time to be sure they're clean. The reason you're being so careful is because any oil or meat or anything that's on the rim or on the threads can ruin your seal and cause your food to go bad. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our lids. And by the way, the new rules say you don't have to simmer these, and the box instructions just say to take it out of the box and put it on the lid, on the jar. Now, I do rinse mine in warm water. I don't simmer them, I don't boil them. Then you take your rings, you put them on. And sometimes you have to run back and forth so you find the right threads line up. There we go. And you tighten them down. You saw a moment ago that we had the first layer of jars in the canner ready to go. My canner is a large canner. It takes 2 layers of pint-sized jars. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put a new rack between the layers. This is the rack. It has holes to allow the water to go through so that the steam and the water can get to all of the jars in there. And all we do is lay it straight down, and it sits down and the water comes through. Then we take each of our bottles, and since the water does not come up and cover them, you don't have to use a jar lift for putting them in. And you just set them inside the canner just like this. That gives us 15 pints of hamburger meat. The next thing we're going to do, and I often forget to tell you this, is we're going to take what's left of our vinegar and we're going to pour it into the canner. The reason for that is because I live in an area that has extremely hard water. And when I forget to do that, my jars come out of the canner after processing with a white film on it that's very hard to get off. Sometimes I have to get out a steel wool pad to get that white film off them. That's really a pain, and it's just as easy to pour the vinegar in there, so that's what I do. We are doing pressure canning. I know there are a lot of people out there that are very nervous about pressure canning, and you really shouldn't be. The new pressure canning setups have all kinds of safety built into them. One of the first things you need to know is this is called a steam vent. This is where your excess steam comes out. That's the first line of defense against explosions. It won't explode if the steam doesn't build up in there sufficiently. Every time you use it, you should lift it up to a bright light. There we are. Lift it up to a bright light, look through it, and see if you can see the light. That, if you can, that means it's clear and it's safe to use. Also, this is what's called a metal-to-metal canner. It does not have a rubber gasket that goes in there to protect it or to cushion it. What you have to do, if you have a metal-to-metal, is you have to do your own protection and cushioning. I use coconut oil, and all you do is take your pastry brush and just brush a little bit around the outside. It doesn't take a lot. It just takes a little to be sure there's something in there to keep the metal from sticking to itself during the canning process. Now I've already done this to the lid because, again, I didn't figure you'd want to sit and watch me do the same thing over and over again. So, on this canner, there is a little slot in the side of the lid. That slot lines up with a small arrow that's cut into the side of the lid. So when you put it on, you put it so that the arrow is just past the slot, get it seated well, and then turn it back until they line up. This allows the little L-shaped brackets, let me open it back a little bit. These little L-shaped brackets right here slide under a part of the lid. This is all one piece of aluminum, and these little things that stick out are part of the original piece. The important thing we're doing now, and it is a safety feature, is we're locking down opposite sides at the same time. You don't want to go from front around the back to front one at a time this way. Because what you're trying to do is get even tightness holding the lid on. It also holds our little L-shaped brackets down. So, it is all tight and it is all on there. At this point, we have a cold canner, we have cold meat inside cold jars, and we have a cold water. So what we will do is we'll turn the heat on and allow the water inside and the meat and jars inside to come up to pressure, come up to heat at the same time. Eventually, it will get hot enough that it'll start making steam, and there will be steam come out of this little vent. Once that happens, I'll set a timer, and it has to vent a steady stream of steam for 15 minutes. That gets all the extra air out of the canner and allows it to build up enough pressure so that you can do pressure canning. Once that happens, I'll put a weight on the lid, and we'll watch this. This is our gauge, and it will slowly come up to 10 pounds. Once it reaches 10 pounds, I will set the timer for 75 minutes because they are pints, and I will turn the temperature down from 10 on my electric stove down to about 8.5. That allows the pressure to stay the same, but it doesn't keep building pressure. It stays right at the 10 pounds. I'll allow it to process for the 75 minutes, then I'll turn off the heat and allow it to rest for approximately 45 minutes to an hour. In that time, this pressure will go back to 0. Then I'll take the gauge off, the weight off, let it sit 5 more minutes, open the thing with the lid away from me, and then I can take the jars out and they will be processed. You have to let them cool and then label them, and they can go on your shelf. So right now, we're going to turn on the heat and wait for it to steam. I will bring you back when the processing is done and we're ready to take the jars out of the canner. Welcome back. It's been 75 minutes of processing time, another half hour of cooling down time. According to my gauge, there is no pressure left, so I can take off the weight and open it up. Let's see what we've got. Okay. There is still a lot of heat. A lot of heat. The locks are hot to the touch. You unlock this the same way you locked it, going opposite sides. Now, we're going to open the lid, but I want to tell you, caution you, it's still very hot in there. Anytime you open a canner, you always open it away from you, just in case there's steam in there. You don't want it blowing in your face. And as you can see, there was still a lot of heat in there. There's our first jar. You can look real close, Mr. Cameraman. They can see that it's boiling like crazy in there. Now, y'all have seen me take things out of these canners before, and you're seeing me do it now. So I'm not going to bore you with doing everything, but I will let you know that we had 5 on the top layer, we had 10 on the bottom layer. So there are 15 bottles, 15 pint bottles, which is 1 pound in each bottle of hamburger meat. also very hot. Here we go, and it's still bubbling. I will take all 15 of the jars out and set them here and leave them overnight to cool. Tomorrow morning I'll take the rings off. I'll test to be sure that everything is sealed well. Then I'll wash them and put a label on them, and they'll be ready to go in my pantry. Very soon I will be doing a video showing you some ways to use our canned meat. In the meanwhile, if you have not subscribed to my channel, please do so, and don't forget to check the notification bell so that you'll know each time I send out a video. Please like this video because that tells YouTube that you support me and support the videos that I make. I hope that you learned a lot. If you have any questions, please put them below in the comment section and I'll do my best to answer them. In the meantime, take care, God bless, bye, see you later.